Lena said. "Please, just give me a chance," as her voice shook like thin glass ready to break. Victor stood tall, staring at her belly as if it were an insult, and the cold silence in the room cut deeper than any word he could say. She felt her world slipping away in a single breath. The office lights buzzed above her, bright and cruel, making her feel small as every hope she carried drained out of her shaking hands. How could a moment so short change a life so completely? What if the girl they pushed aside becomes the name they fear one day? Can a single choice decide a future meant to rise again? She held her breath as Victor finally spoke, and his voice felt like a door slamming in her soul. Lena said, "I gave everything I had," as she stood outside the building, gripping the cold air like it could hold her together. The street noise felt far away, almost unreal, as if the world kept moving while her life was stopping. She looked at the glass windows above, remembering every late night she stayed to prove she was worth keeping. Now her throat tightened with a pain she didn't know how to swallow. She wondered how a man could erase her future with a few simple words, and how she was supposed to walk forward when each step felt heavier than the last. Yet, something inside her whispered that she had to keep going. She walked slowly down the street, feeling each movement like a weight chained to her feet. Lena said, "I can't believe this is real," as she pressed her hand to her belly, trying to remind herself why she couldn't fall apart. Cars passed with bright lights that blurred against her vision, and the world felt distant, cold, and too fast for her broken thoughts. Every step brought a new fear: rent, food, medicine, the baby. The unknown felt bigger than the sky above her, and she wondered if anyone could survive a moment like this. Lena stopped near a small bench, letting herself sit as her legs trembled from more than exhaustion. She whispered, "Please, let tomorrow be kinder." Though she didn't believe it yet, the night pressed close around her, filled with the distant sound of traffic and the hum of neon signs. She felt alone in a world that didn't slow down for anyone's pain. She held her belly gently, hoping her child couldn't feel her fear. Every future she once dreamed of seemed to fade, one by one, leaving her in the quiet shadow of uncertainty. Maria found her the next morning, sitting outside the building with a blank stare. Lena said, "I didn't know where else to go," as Maria reached for her with gentle hands. The warmth surprised her after a night of cold fear. Maria's voice was soft, telling her she wasn't alone, and for the first time since everything collapsed, Lena felt the faint glow of hope. The world had taken so much from her in a single day, but one kind touch reminded her that not everyone wished her harm. She leaned into that comfort, letting it fill the cracks left by the night. Lena held her breath as the hospital room filled with silence, broken only by the tiny cries of the life she had fought so hard to protect. She said, "It's just you and me now," letting her words steady the shaking inside her chest. The moment should have been bright and full of joy, yet she felt the shadow of her recent losses leaning over her shoulder. She tried to smile even as fear pressed against her ribs, reminding her she had no home ready, no job waiting, and no one standing beside her. She wrapped the baby in the thin blanket. The nurse left behind, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep, but she knew she had to try. In that small room, she felt the first spark of strength push through her exhaustion. Lena pushed the stroller down the narrow street, heart pounding as she counted the few bills left in her pocket. She said, "There has to be something I can do," though the doubt in her voice betrayed her fear. Each shop she passed felt like another door that might close on her, yet she kept moving because stopping meant sinking. She studied the board of part-time jobs pinned outside a small cafe, hoping for anything, even if it barely paid. The wind brushed against her face, cold and sharp, reminding her of the night she lost everything. But when she looked at her son sleeping, she felt the tiny spark inside her grow, whispering that she wasn't done fighting. By afternoon, Lena's feet ached from walking block after block, each rejection echoing in her mind like a reminder that she no longer belonged anywhere. She said, "I'll try again tomorrow," though her voice barely rose above a whisper. The street smelled of fresh bread from the bakery she couldn't afford, and for a moment she let herself imagine a life where she didn't have to choose between food and bus fare. A stranger bumped her shoulder and she steadied herself, refusing to fall. Her hunger clawed at her, but she pushed it aside, telling herself that her baby needed every bit of strength she had left. Even as fear circled her thoughts, she kept moving. She was adjusting the blanket over her son when a calm voice behind her said, "You look like you could use a seat." Lena turned to see a man with gentle eyes offering her a chair inside the community workspace. She hesitated, unsure if kindness would cost her something she couldn't give. Nathan said, "It's warm in here." "You're safe," and something in his tone made her believe him. She stepped inside slowly, letting the heat wash over her frozen hands. For the first time in days, she felt seen not as a burden, but as someone worth helping. She whispered, "Thank you," and hoped he couldn't hear the shake in her voice. Nathan brought her a cup of warm tea and listened quietly as she explained her situation in simple, shaking words. She said, "I just need a chance to stand again." And he nodded with a seriousness that made her feel understood. He told her about free classes held in the evenings and said she could bring her baby if she needed to. The idea felt impossible and hopeful at the same time. She stared at the steam rising from the cup, realizing how long it had been since someone believed she had potential. For a moment, she let herself imagine a future where she wasn't always running from fear. Lena sat at the small desk in the evening class, her son asleep in the stroller beside her, and she said, "I have to learn this. I have to." The room buzzed softly with the faint hum of old lights and quiet keyboard taps. Every new concept felt like climbing a steep hill, yet she pushed through, driven by the memory of every door that closed on her. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, but she kept reading, tracing each line with a steady hand. She knew her life wouldn't change overnight, but she felt the first shift within her, like a tiny flame refusing to die. The more she learned, the more she believed she could build something with her own hands, something no one could take from her again. Weeks later, Lena sat at her kitchen table, using an old laptop Nathan helped her repair. She said, "I can do small jobs. I can start here." As she scrolled through online listings, the room smelled of simple soup cooking on the stove, and the soft weight of her son leaning against her leg kept her grounded. She sent out her first proposal with shaking fingers, afraid of rejection but more afraid of staying stuck forever. The screen's glow lit her face as she pressed submit, her heart racing with the fragile courage she had gathered. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't waiting for the world to save her. She was beginning to save herself. Lena felt her heart jump when she received her first message saying, "We'd like to hire you," she whispered. "Thank you. Thank you." As her eyes filled with a relief she hadn't felt in years. She worked late into the night, typing carefully, checking each detail twice. Her son slept nearby, his soft breaths reminding her why she couldn't stop. Every completed task made her confidence grow bit by bit, like she was stitching together the pieces of a life she had once been forced to abandon. She no longer felt invisible. She felt useful, capable, and on the edge of something bigger than she could yet name. Nathan watched her progress with pride as she brought a stack of finished assignments to show him. He said, "You're doing better than you think," while she tried to hide how much those words meant to her. Sitting across from him, she felt something shift. She no longer felt like someone broken asking for help. She felt like someone rebuilding. She explained her ideas, her dreams, her fears, and Nathan listened with the same patient smile he always gave her. By the end of their talk, she felt a strength she didn't recognize at first. A strength that had been quietly forming with every hour she pushed forward. Nathan placed a simple folder on the table and said, "There's a group of small investors meeting next month. You should be there." Lena froze, unsure if she deserved a place in such a room. She murmured, "Do you really think I can do it?" And he nodded with the calm certainty she had borrowed from him many times. She imagined walking into a space filled with confident voices and sharp suits, and wondered if she could ever belong among them. But then she remembered the cold office where her life fell apart, and realized she had already survived the worst. She inhaled deeply, feeling a new part of herself rise. She whispered, "Okay, I'll try," letting the future open just a little wider. Lena stood outside the small conference hall, staring at her reflection in the glass door, trying to calm the storm racing through her chest. She said, "Just breathe. You've worked for this," though her hands trembled as if the past still held her by the wrist. Inside, voices buzzed with confidence, and she felt like she was about to step into a world that didn't know who she used to be, only who she hoped to become. She held her folder close, remembering every night she studied, while her son slept, every rejection that tried to break her, and every soft word of support Nathan gave her. As she stepped inside, she felt the old fear fade just enough for her to walk forward. This time, she wasn't here to beg. She was here to rise. Inside the hall, Lena listened as others pitched ideas that sounded polished and powerful, far smoother than anything she had ever prepared. For a moment, doubt crawled up her spine, whispering that she didn't belong here. She said, "I can't back out now," pushing back against the fear that wanted to pull her under. She studied the faces of the investors, noticing their sharp expressions and confident postures, and realized they weren't the monsters she once imagined. They were simply people. She held her notes tightly, reminding herself of the nights she stayed awake, crafting each line. Her turn was coming, and though her heart pounded, she felt something stronger beneath the fear, a quiet belief that she had earned this shot. When Lena stepped up to the podium, her pulse thudded so loudly she worried others might hear it. She said, "Thank you for giving me a moment," her voice steady despite the storm inside her. As she began explaining her idea, the words started to flow more naturally, shaped by every hour she spent perfecting them. She spoke not with practiced polish, but with sincerity, letting her story weave gently into the purpose behind her project. The room grew quieter, the investors leaning in slightly, as her voice softened, then strengthened. She realized they weren't judging her. They were listening. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like her voice mattered. As Lena finished her presentation, a long pause filled the room, and she felt her breath catch. One investor finally said, "You have something real here." And the warmth in their tone made her shoulders loosen for the first time that day. Another asked thoughtful questions, and Lena answered each one with a calm she didn't know she had. She said, "I built this from what little I had," hoping her honesty wouldn't be seen as weakness. But instead, she saw nods of respect from across the table. When they exchanged glances with one another, she knew something had shifted. For once, she wasn't being dismissed. She was being considered. When the meeting ended, Lena stepped into the hallway with her hands trembling, but this time it wasn't from fear. She said, "I think they liked it," almost afraid to believe her own words. Nathan smiled and told her she had done even better than she realized. Holding her son close, she felt a surge of hope so strong it almost brought her to tears. She had walked into a room she once thought was built only for people stronger, richer, or luckier than her. And now she walked out, knowing she had earned her place through grit, faith, and the quiet fire inside. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the first real step toward the life she wanted. Lena walked through her small office, touching each new desk as if testing whether it was real. She said, "We're actually growing," her voice soft with disbelief and pride. The hum of computers filled the room, a sound she once only heard in other people's workplaces. Now it belonged to her team, people who believed in her idea enough to stay late and show up early. She glanced at the simple logo on the wall, remembering the nights she worked on it while her son slept beside her. She felt no need to hide her past anymore. It had shaped the woman she was becoming. She moved from desk to desk, answering questions, offering guidance, and realizing she was no longer fighting just to survive. She was leading something that mattered, something she built from the ashes of her hardest years. In a team meeting, Lena shared her vision with a clarity she once thought she'd never have. She said, "We'll grow steady and honest. No shortcuts, no cruelty." And her team nodded with trust she had earned through patience and fairness. She watched them listening to her, really listening, and felt a warm pride she didn't know leadership could bring. Their ideas sparked in the room like tiny flames, and she guided each one gently, shaping them into plans the team could follow. She remembered the cold office where she once stood powerless, and let the memory fuel her promise to never treat anyone the way she had been treated. Leading with kindness felt like healing a younger version of herself who once walked home in fear. As the months passed, Lena felt the weight of her past drift further away. She walked home one evening, pushing her son's stroller, and said, "Look how far we've come," even though he was too young to understand. But speaking the words out loud made them feel true. Her life no longer felt like a string of crises. It felt like something steady, something she could trust. She saw her reflection in a store window, her posture straighter, her eyes brighter, and realized she no longer carried the fear that once ruled her. She felt a quiet strength growing inside her, built from every risk she took and every long night she survived. She wasn't the broken woman who once begged for fairness. She was someone who could stand tall on her own terms. One evening, Lena sat on the floor with her son as he stacked blocks into a tall tower. He said, "Look, Mama." And she felt her heart swell in a way success alone could never give her. She said, "I'm proud of you." But the words echoed deeper, touching the version of herself who once felt unseen. Watching him laugh reminded her why she fought through every hardship, and she realized he wasn't just her reason to keep going. He was her proof that she had survived. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the simple joy of being safe, stable, and present. The fear that once haunted her was fading, replaced by the soft glow of a life she never believed she deserved. Months later, Lena signed the final paperwork confirming her company's participation in a major merger. She said, "This is it. We're really moving forward." Her voice steady but filled with awe. Nathan stood beside her, celebrating the milestone with the same faith he had from the beginning. She looked at the documents, realizing how different her life was from the day she was fired for simply carrying a child. Now she wasn't stepping into survival. She was stepping into expansion, recognition, and respect. She held her son close, letting her triumph settle into her bones. The world that once crushed her now opened its doors, not because someone decided she was worthy, but because she made herself unstoppable. Lena stepped through the revolving doors of the towering building, the same one where her life had once shattered. She said, "I can do this," though her heart pounded like it remembered every painful moment that happened here. The lobby looked larger than she recalled, brighter, almost polished with a confidence she hadn't possessed years ago. She held her folder steady, feeling the weight of the past and the power of the woman she had become. Her heels clicked across the marble floor, each step sounding like a quiet declaration that she no longer belonged to the broken version of herself. She inhaled deeply, letting the scent of fresh coffee and clean glass anchor her. This time, she wasn't the frightened girl being pushed out. She was the woman being invited in. And she walked forward, knowing she had earned every inch of this moment. As Lena walked to the elevator, memories pushed at her like shadows she couldn't quite outrun. She said, "This place used to scare me," letting the words drift out as she pressed the elevator button. The cool metal under her finger reminded her of the day she stood trembling, holding her old folder like armor that couldn't protect her. Now, she carried plans, contracts, and opportunities shaped by her own strength. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime and she stepped inside, feeling the air shift around her as the doors began to close. The ride upward felt symbolic, every floor a reminder of how far she had climbed on her own. She watched her reflection in the metal walls and barely recognized the woman staring back, steady, composed, unbroken. She whispered, "You're not that girl anymore," and believed it. When the boardroom doors opened, Lena froze for half a second as her eyes caught the one face she once feared most. Victor stood near the window, older now, still sharply dressed, yet carrying a tension she had never seen before. He looked at her with a shock that cracked through his controlled expression. She said, "Good morning," her voice calm and steady, refusing to let the past pull her down. The board members turned, curious about the woman commanding the room so quietly. Lena walked to her seat with purpose, each step washing away a piece of the pain he had caused. She felt no need to shrink, no urge to explain. The power he once used to crush her no longer touched her, and the look on his face told her he finally understood that. Lena laid out her proposal with a calm, commanding tone that filled the room without force. She said, "Our terms are clear, and we believe this merger will benefit both sides, guiding the conversation with confidence born from years of struggle and quiet victories." She didn't look at Victor often, but when she did, she saw him shrinking behind the sharp edges of his suit. The others leaned forward, interested in her clarity and purpose. Asking questions, she answered with ease. This boardroom once represented everything she lost: her job, her dignity, her sense of safety. But now it felt like a stage for the person she had become. And each time she lifted her eyes, she saw respect in faces that had never seen her before. When the vote concluded, the board chose her company's terms without hesitation. Lena said, "Thank you," her voice steady as she gathered her papers, though her chest swelled with a quiet victory she never needed to boast about. Victor looked at her with a mix of disbelief and regret, but she felt no desire to gloat or remind him of the day he threw her away. Instead, she simply nodded, letting him see the strength he once refused to recognize. She held her son's hand as they prepared to leave the room, knowing she had reclaimed the space where her story once fell apart. This time, she walked out not as a victim, but as a leader who rewrote her own ending. Victor followed Lena into the hallway, his steps hesitant, his voice lower than she had ever heard it. He said, "I was wrong." But the words felt small compared to the damage he once caused. Lena turned slowly, her heart steady, her breath calm. She no longer felt the sting of his voice or the weight of his choices, only the quiet strength she had built over years of climbing. She answered, "I've moved on, not with anger, but with truth that set her free." She saw the regret in his eyes, but she knew it wasn't her job to heal it. She had carried enough pain already. She walked away peacefully, leaving him alone with the consequences of who he chose to be. She felt lighter with each step, knowing forgiveness wasn't needed for closure. Lena stepped into the elevator with her son and whispered, "It's finally over," letting the warmth of relief wash over her. She felt the walls around her loosen, as if the building itself was releasing her. Eli tugged her sleeve and said, "Mama, you're smiling." She couldn't help but laugh quietly. She realized the victory wasn't in proving Victor wrong. It was in proving herself right. She had survived the worst version of her life and rebuilt it piece by piece. And now, standing with her son in her arms, she knew she had become everything she once prayed she could be. The elevator doors began to close, sealing away the last chapter of her old life. Outside the building, Lena felt sunlight touch her skin like a blessing she had waited years to feel. She said, "We're free now," as Eli squeezed her hand and jumped playfully beside her. Cars passed. People hurried. The world moved as usual. But something inside her felt brand new. The fear she once carried walked away in silence, leaving room for peace she never thought she'd earn. She breathed deeply, letting hope fill her lungs with every breath. The pain of the past seemed distant, like an old dream she no longer lived in. For the first time, she felt completely present, grounded in a life she built with her own strength. As they walked toward the street corner, Lena paused, looking at her son's bright smile. He said, "Mama, can we get ice cream?" And she felt her heart soften in a way power and success could never match. She whispered, "Yes, we can do anything now," letting the truth rest sweetly on her tongue. She realized that every painful night, every hungry day, every tear she hid from her son had led her here. To a simple, ordinary moment filled with peace. The life she wanted wasn't about revenge or recognition. It was about this: love, safety, and the freedom to choose joy without fear. That night, after Eli fell asleep, Lena stood by the window watching the city glow. She said, "We made it," letting the words settle softly in the quiet room. She thought of every closed door, every unkind face, and every moment she almost gave up. Yet here she stood, not broken, not bitter, but stronger than any version of herself she'd ever imagined. She realized her victory wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and deeply earned. She placed her hand on the window, feeling the cool glass under her palm, and smiled to herself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, and new chances. But tonight, she allowed herself to rest in the beauty of her own resilience.